obviously we had this evolution in mind from day one. We developed this exhibition in a team of 3 collaborating museums, and the issue of how would it age was on our minds from the start. And this whole exhibition was designed to be a traveling exhibition. So we need to be very, we need to embrace this issue very early on. And that's why we decided very early not to look into, the newest, latest technology, the newest, hottest robots. But we decided to look into the implications for our society. And the way we did that was through asking questions. And I think these questions are very valid, no matter what technology exactly we're looking at. And we have examples for that in the exhibition. We have examples from, the 50s, like Jacques Tati, mon oncle, who struggles with his sister's kitchen, infamously. But also we look into possible futures like WALL-E, where people a couple of hundred years from today, can't even walk because they have been chauffeured in robotic lounges instead of walking. So the question, do I need this, and how far do I want technology to take over my life personally, but also as a society, are questions that are really entirely disconnected with the type of technology that we're looking at. And I think this is why the exhibition works so well also, because it doesn't age. The questions are super relevant today. When it came back from its 5-year tour and I saw it again, I was like, wow, this is so fresh. And we didn't change that much. We did tweak here and there. We added a few more objects. But to be honest with you, the exhibits themselves, the artifacts that we added, aren't necessarily the latest, newest, hottest thing. They pick up discussions or discourse that has maybe gained momentum since the exhibition first opened, like the discussion about technology that monitors labor, like in big warehouses, as people use wearable terminals as they go along and do their tasks. And this is how these big companies, and it's just one company and I'm not naming it, but we all know who I'm talking about, and this is how this company really monitors its employees every minute, every second of the day. And this is something that was not as widely discussed when we first opened the show in 2017. Another thing but now it is, and therefore we added a wearable terminal. But the item itself is, I think it's old, it's from, I think, 2010 or something. So it's not the artifact itself that's maybe new, but the discourse around it. And another thing that we discovered, or we think really changed since the exhibition first started, is the way we speak about this whole issue. I remember at the time, very briefly before the opening, I found an article in a big newspaper in Germany, and the title was, as I mentioned in the current edition of the catalog, the title was not very how do you say, it wouldn't be okay to talk like this in front of your grandma, probably. And the title said, "Fuck you, Silicon Valley." And it was one of the first articles that was really critical about Silicon Valley. I remember the discourse in general was so benign and almost, worshipping anything that would come from there. This whole idea of technology saving us and technology being good for society and for humanity, no matter what it did, was much more prevalent than it is today, mainly because evidence that technology and social media can be so harmful for society. And this is a discourse that has changed a lot. And we are reflecting this change of discourse rather than the issue itself, because the issue itself really clearly is just as relevant as it was 5 years ago, if not more relevant. When we look at the very current discussion about technology, AI-driven technology, like DALL-E or ChatGPT, and all of these new, astonishing tools that, have surged all of a sudden. What I find really interesting is this whole conversation about, oh my God, will artists, lose relevance? Will art lose relevance? Can AI create better art and so on? And I think that's not the question. The question is, how do we use these new tools to actually create new and other interesting art, right? I mean, it's the same conversation we had at the rise of photography, when photography was not regarded as any, way of producing art. And it's going to be the same with photography. Obviously, any selfie that we take is not art. Most of what we do with photography is not art, but there is photography that is astonishing art. And the same is going to be true for, texts or images created by artificial intelligence. Most of it will be crap. And some of it will be just incredibly amazing art. And that's the point. As you say, it is a tool. And like any other tool, we can use it in such a way or in a different way. We can use a knife to cook a great meal, or we can use a knife to stab someone. And that's the point. And this is how we need to look at it. I think it's really essential, because this is also really at the core of the concept for this exhibition. Many people and the whole discourse seems to be either extremely in favor of new technology or extremely against. There's nothing in between. It's either yay or oh my God, we're doomed. And while I do see why people feel we might be doomed, I also see why, there's so much great potential. And the point is, it's both. And we need to discuss both. And we need to discuss amongst humans how and in which ways and where we want to implement, and we want technology to have a place and to play a role. And this is something that we need to discuss, amongst humans. I don't want to discuss this with an artificial intelligence. I really want to discuss this with other humans and have a set of rules and regulations that will, very clearly define what is allowed and what is acceptable and what is not. And, if we look at phenomena like troll farms and bot armies and fake news info warriors and whatnot, I feel there is a lot of really, really, really big need for regulations. We need to discuss this on a worldwide level, because that's, how these technologies operate. So it's ambitious, but I believe in humanity. So we don't speak about legislation specifically. There wasn't much legislation in 2017 when it opened. Now there is, but laws are something quite boring, right? But of course they're important. And what we challenge visitors to do, rather than speak about existing legislation, is really to think about how they would like technology to be, regulated. I think obviously there is an incredible variety of regulation all across the world, and I would claim, living inside the EU, I may be very privileged in this regard. I think, at least according to my opinion, the EU has quite progressive legislation that puts boundaries to what is possible in big technology and what is not, much more than elsewhere. On the other side, the downside to this is obviously that, when you have no regulation, then possibly this is more, this is enhancing creativity. Now, do we need a lot of creativity in a market that is dominated by a handful, or maybe two handsful globally, of big players? I'm not sure. I think it makes sense now, for now at least, to find some initial regulation that really puts boundaries to what is happening in big technology. Because, these are huge, massively rich, massively powerful companies. And I really believe that as a society, or as societies all across the globe, we should be taking back some of this power and control from them. I really think that what is happening in social media and all these new media with these very few companies is quite frightening, in my opinion. And I believe that we should be putting out more legislation to limit them. So curatorially, this exhibition was a collaboration between the Vitra Design Museum, the Museum of Applied Arts in Vienna, and the Design Museum in Ghent in Belgium. And we were a team of 4 curators, and of 6 rather, from these institutions. And it was quite interesting because we had different roles, really. So me and my assistant and one curator from one of the other museums, we came, we have a design background, and we were in the middle. And then there was an art curator, and there was a technology geek, if you want, to the 2 sides. And it was really interesting because, we, the design people, we were really, basically we took the role that design always takes. We translated, we made a bridge, we connected. And that was really interesting, because this is really a lot what this whole conversation is about, right? You have often artistic work that is very critical and, rather conjuring doomsday. And then you have, maybe like an exhibition in a technical museum or a science museum that would be much more celebratory. And we the design people went in the middle of that, and we have it all, and that is something that I think really the exhibition benefited from. So we have these different perspectives that came in, and that is quite nice, I think. Another thing that I think works really nicely with the exhibition is that there's a lot of fun stuff. I mean, there's R2D2. Come on! I mean, what's not to like? It's such amazing artifacts, Or we have games, we have robots that do stuff. So there's a lot of fun elements, and at the same time, obviously, we try to be critical. We try to raise questions, and this is, as I mentioned before, this is really a methodology to push the whole exhibition to a level that is beyond the specific technology that we are discussing at the moment. So the whole exhibition is organized around 14 questions that start with, have you ever met a robot? And end with, do you want to become, better than nature intended? Do you want to live in a robot? And so on. So we are really going on a journey closer and closer to this robot. At first, looking at the robot from a quite distant perspective. And the interesting thing about these questions is that they seem quite simple, but if you start thinking about them really thoroughly, and that's what we intend, obviously, and we invite the visitors to do, especially, looking at the artifacts, you realize that they're actually not that easy to answer. While in the beginning you think it's a clear yes or a clear no, you start to realize, well, actually it's both or neither nor. You have to ask an entirely different question first. So it becomes very ambivalent and very, gray. It's not clear white and black anymore. And this is how, we try to raise, we try to raise these questions. We try to enhance the conversation and start the conversation. And often, as I said, often you have to ask an entirely different question. The question, have you ever met a robot, is basically senseless as long as you haven't defined what a robot actually is, right? So what is a robot is the question that you need to ask first. And then you will realize, oh, actually, yes, each of us has met many robots, because every automated supermarket cash, exit thingy is a robot. Every automated sliding door is a robot. Robots can be they're everywhere, and most of the time they're so disappointingly dull. And we have this idea of robots that look and act like anything we know from movies or novels, but that's fiction. Most of the time robots are very mundane. And of course, all of us have already met robots. And ultimately, even, this little machine that we all carry in our pockets, you could claim together with us, at least, it's at least a semi-robotic system. And that's what we do in the first section of the exhibition. We define what is a robot for us in this exhibition, because there's no one definition, in case you were looking for it. I'm also teaching in design schools theory, and when I present myself, I often go through different stages of emotion in my career as a curator. And so I started my career with actually I didn't start it, but one of I would say a milestone exhibition that I did was an exhibition about design and creative work on the continent of Africa. And that was, there was this whole celebratory vibe about it, there's so much. So it was very joyful. And then came Hello Robot. And I think, the newspaper article that I mentioned in the beginning, "Fuck You, Silicon Valley," really sums it up nicely. I was so angry. And I was so surprised about the lack of conversation. And I was so angry about how we have all been, it's not in the present, it has already happened, how we have all been turned into commodity. That made me so angry. This, the realization that by creating tools that are so convenient to use and so easy and help so much, individually, but also, on a societal level, but then the price that we all pay for it being so high, that is something that really, I would say, is almost overshadowing the positive effects. Because obviously, there is a lot of really exciting potential in all of these new technologies. It's just again, it's a question of how we use them, and ultimately, if we choose to use them against humanity, we can also choose to use them in favor of humanity. And this is something that is, I'm very hopeful. I believe this is something that can happen. We just need to wake up and see, but we have woken up. That's the good news. A lot has happened since 2017. There has been a lot of different programming in the different on its international in the international tour. I remember there was a huge symposium in Korea that discussed, the ups and downs, up and downsides of technology. Quite interestingly, because the venue was, the venue is sponsored by the company of Motorola. So obviously that is an interesting venue to have a conversation about technology. At the same time, I remember in Vienna, it was shown within a biennale that dealt with technology and so various different aspects of technology. That was really nice. And smaller events and conversations like the one that the Vitra Design Museum just had on YouTube, with featuring a conversation between Kate Crawford and Guy Hoffman, a roboticist. That was super interesting. Even if we just reach one person and then create some reasoning, some analysis about how people very individually use their phones, that's already a success, in my opinion. Everybody who starts thinking about, wait, do I really need to share my position right now, my location? Do I really need to put this online? Do I really want to, use health applications? Am I really sure about the data? Where does it go? How am I being commodified in this regard? And so on and so on. What consequences does that have? I think this is great. Every single person who has, who starts thinking about these issues in a different way, to me, are a success. Well, we have seen in these past years, due to what, we have seen a lot of exhibitions going online. And I think there's a lot of potential in that, because, all of a sudden, although we were all locked inside our homes, we were able to see exhibitions all across the world. And I thought this was really nice. and very joyful, and at least for me, a very welcome a very welcome way to escape the limits of my home. Is it the same as really wandering through exhibition? I don't know. I think this may be a generational thing also. I really love objects. I love museums. I love to go somewhere and be immersed in an environment that really addresses all of my senses. I'm not particularly a fan of, these digital immersive installations, because they lack a significant part, and that is, this all sensual experience. I love smelling stuff. And if you enter a museum, they have smells, and even they have different smells according to where within that museum you are. And I think that's something wonderful. Obviously, most of the times we may not touch, but at least, there is more than one sense that is being addressed. And I personally really love that. So I think even with technology, it's not the same, because even if you look at a screen in a museum, you will experience it in a different way than if you look at a screen in your house. I like museums. I have to, I'm a curator, but I really believe that we need spaces that shut out other stimulus, right? I'm always very wary of inviting visitors to use their cell phones, which is something that, some curators do very voluntarily and deliberately. But I think there's so much potential in getting distraction, right? Once you take your phone out, oh, there's a new message. Oh, here's something. Oh, there's some, and then, your attention is anywhere, but not with the exhibition, with the objects that's the museum put together so carefully. Also, what's interesting, if you are in a space, you should never underestimate the effect that space has, right? You can layer things quite literally, you can put things behind each other, or in a certain position to each other, so that will create an effect that is different than click next, click next, click next. But if you see something from this perspective and then from another perspective, because you raise your head and you see the same artifact that you've seen 5 minutes earlier, but from another angle, that does something, right? And good exhibition design has those effects in mind. And that is something that can never be replicated online, obviously.